Mike Gundy was pretty fired up in talking about the business of college football. And if there is somebody out there, a coach out there who you would imagine probably is not deep down crazy fond about the way the game is structured and the game is played now, and NIL and the transfer portal and all that stuff, Mike Gundy would be pretty high on that list. Okay. But he went on a little bit of a mini rant here and said, hey, he's talking to players, saying we have to tell players, quote, tell your agent to quit calling us and asking for more money. It's non-negotiable now. It'll start again in December. Now we're able to direct ourselves just to football, and that part has been fun. Now, Mike Gundy also said it's been hard to focus on just football because there have been a lot of distractions, and I would point out that Mike Gundy is the source of some of those distractions by his, 4 beers and get behind the wheel, done it 1,000 times. He brought some of that on himself. Now, whether or not that was a direct attempt by him to shield Ollie Gordon from controversy and bring it onto himself, I know I have heard that conspiracy theory out there. Perhaps there's some truth to it. Either way, he has certainly been a source of some of the distractions. But between Ollie Gordon's DUI, between, I'm sure, having to fend off everybody that was coming after Nick Martin and Ollie Gordon, everybody that Oklahoma State had that they had to hang on to, I get it. I'm sure it adds up and it becomes very, very taxing. And there are some things that are very admirable here about what Mike Gundy had to say. I mean, this seemed to draw a decent reaction on Twitter. A lot of people were reacting to it. I don't think this is inherently bad. I don't necessarily think it's over the top good either. I'm kind of neutral on this Gundy quote. I think there are some things on both sides of this that I'm like, hey, great, or maybe I would do that a little bit differently. For one, as a content creator and somebody that covers the league and has dealt with a million press conferences in my career before and seen the worst of coach speak and just boring quote after quote after quote, I very much appreciate Gundy with this. It is a very real, interesting quote that you don't get from a lot of people. Mike Gundy has been excellent at delivering that throughout his career. Obviously, like, people know him singularly for a quote that he dropped like 20 years ago. The guy has been a walking quote for good and bad, and there have been plenty of both throughout his career. So I love that from him. Don't get me wrong. I love Mike Gundy for that. I also do appreciate how, his tone in all of this is kind of like handling it like a business. It's handling it like a business, okay? Hey, this is the reality. They have agents. We're having to hear from these agents who are trying to negotiate for more money, even when we're trying to play football. And there's no room to really do it at that point in time. That's the reality. I'm telling these guys to just cool it with that because we can't do anything about it. We got to go play football. Very much seems like, something a professional coach might say if they were asked or approached in this sort of way. And actually, the coach really wouldn't. It would be more like the GM, right? You have a different layer there, whereas Oklahoma State or a college program, you're probably taking on a little bit more of that yourself. It's a little less organized. And part of that is because college sports won't do exactly what Mike Gundy is doing here in this quote, like the NCAA. When I say college sports, it's the NCAA. Won't do exactly what Mike Gundy is doing here in this quote, which is treat it like a business. Treat it like what it is. It is big business. That's what he's doing. He's eventually gotten there. And he takes this attitude into other aspects. Mike Gundy and Coach Prime are not really very similar in their approach, who they are, all of that, right? But I heard Mike Gundy say at Big 12 Media Days in Vegas, like, hey, he's great for our league. He puts eyeballs onto TV sets that watch our league, and that's what we need. That's my paraphrasing there, okay? But that is in essence what Gundy said. And I thought, I don't think Mike Gundy is probably a huge fan. I'm just guessing, but probably not a huge fan of a lot of what Deion does and how he operates, especially considering like Oklahoma State. I mean, they don't use the portal that much. They have the second fewest portal additions of any Big 12 school this year. And Colorado is quite the opposite. Prime seeks out the attention. Gundy just said there's been too much attention on things outside of football, all of that. But he's smart enough to know that the business reality is you need a coach prime in your league because you need more people paying attention and you need more people watching your league. So Mike Gundy, say what you will about him, has seemingly been able to put aside perhaps some of his personal feelings to realize this is a business. I need to treat it as such. And I can recognize what is good and bad for business. Okay. So I appreciate that about the quote. My only pushback here would be one, like I said, he was a part of the distraction. If you want to really get nitpicky here, there have been times where Mike Gundy, it's been a minute, but really flirted with some other jobs. Are you really telling me like his agent wasn't doing a little bit of feeling around there in season? I'd have a hard time believing that never happened when all that was going on, but maybe I am incorrect. Maybe I'm mistaken there. I don't know. The one thing I really would say here is like, I think you run the risk when you have quotes like this coming out, even if you are totally correct that the player doesn't really have any leverage at this point of the year, that there's not really anything that can be done right now. You run the risk of creating kind of a reputation of like, this guy's kind of cranky about players making money or players trying to get theirs. And whether that's fair or not, you don't want to get typecast with that because people talk. And then, the player's family, the agent, the handler, whoever, they'll start looking at this a little cross-eyed like, hey, man, I feel like this might have been some subtle shade at me. I didn't really dig that about this. So wait and see, Gundy, what happens in December when we get to December. I don't love this. And Gundy, let's go back in offseason, was taking a lot of heat just over a year ago for being too late to really flip the switch on embracing NIL. Oklahoma State fans were freaking out about NIL. We're not doing enough of this. That's why we're losing players. He just didn't have like a great reputation there. If you even go back to, like the Chuba Hubbard thing and the t-shirt, like he'd gotten crosswise with players before. The content of what he's saying, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But if it is something that is not, hey, I'm all for players getting theirs and players getting what is coming to them, if it's anything beyond that, I, as a fan, would always worry a little bit about like, I just hope that doesn't get used against them somewhere. Like somewhere, somebody will do some negative recruiting with it being like, hey, see this guy, like he doesn't want you to get paid. And, people, we've got short attention spans. They may just listen to a little bit of it and make up their mind right there. That would be the only thing that I would say that would concern me a little bit if I were a fan. But I was very concerned, like on behalf of Oklahoma State fans at this time last year, for what was going on with Gundy. And the guy delivered a 9-win season where they go to the Big 12 championship game, right? He figured it out. So what do I know? I am just a mere mortal here compared to Mike Gundy and his coaching chops. But that is one thing long-term I would at least be a little bit leery of. But it seems like most people really love the quote, especially those who get frustrated by the current state of the game and the rules in place of the NIL portal. You love Gundy for that. That is totally fine. Your prerogative. Understood.